Good morning, everybody. My name is Sophie Trinan. I'm working for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in the Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia. And welcome to this webinar on experience capitalization for continuous learning. We have reached module 4 of the cycle of experience capitalization. And this module is about the implementation of the experience capitalization process. There are two lessons that are in this module, which are gather, organize, and analyze the information and data that you will collect for this experience capitalization exercise. We have decided to have the implementation stage in two modules. As you can see from the experience capitalization cycle, when you are in the implementation phase, which is on the left side on the screen, this implementation phase is quite important because we have the first part, which is gather and organize and then analyze, which is followed by document and share. So document and share is the object of module 5. And today we will focus ourselves on this first part, which is gather and organize, and then analyze. I will pass the floor to Jorge Chavez Tafour, who is also the facilitator of this module. So, Jorge, the floor is yours now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sophie. Welcome, everybody. As Sophie mentioned, this is the fourth module. We have already done quite a bit into understanding what are we talking about when we talk about experience capitalization and where are we, how do we prepare for it, how do we make sure that we have all the necessary resources and the participants, etc., etc. Now, one of the things we spoke quite a bit last time was that, of course, when we're talking about experience capitalization, we're talking about a particular experience. And one of the points that we had to make sure that we do quite correctly is to select this experience. Now, during this model, we are going to talk about the experience itself, and we're going to look at it in detail. And by this, I mean that we're going to be focusing on what exactly was done during this experience, what were the results, and what do we mean by that, and what do we get out of those results, which is what we exactly called as the analysis. If I go with the slides, you can see that we are interested at this moment in identifying what is it that we did and what happened with the activities that we tried in the field as part of these experiences. Remembering, of course, that experience can be a very broad word which can mean many different things. But in fact, we're talking about most of the times of a particular part of a project. So what did we do with this project and what did we achieve? What we need to start doing in order to be able to describe this experience in detail, we can try to present this in 3 different steps, whereby the first one is to identify what kind of information we are going to be looking for. The second one is how are we going to collect this information? And the third one is how are we going to organize this information so that we can use it the best way possible. So we start with this one, identifying the information. If we're looking at an experience in particular, we can think that we need to, for example, look at the context in which this experience has been taking place, or look at the activities in which the team implemented, look at the solutions which they found, etc. So basically, what we're saying is that we need to first of all discover or think of what kind of information we want to find out to be able to present it in a complete way. If we think of the word description, basically that means capturing responses to all these questions: what, who, when, where, why, etc. If we think of an experience, then we need to know what was done, who was involved, when did these activities take place, where did they take place, etc. So basically, perhaps the easiest way when we're starting this description is to try to put ourselves these questions and try to answer them shortly. What did we do? Who was involved? Who did we work with? When did this take place? Why were we there? What did we want to achieve? Etc. etc. Of course, we can say that all this comes from different sources. This information, I mean, will come from different sources, and we must think that yeah, we can find it in the field. We can find it with the people who work with us. We can find it in those who are going to be joining the capitalization process. Basically, what we need to start doing is trying to think that it may be found as primary information, or it may be found as secondary information. That is, all those reports or publications which have already been made. And when we talk about primary information, we can also make a difference between quantitative information, let's say all the numbers, figures, num but basically numbers, and then at the same time qualitative information. So what we're doing right now is trying to see, okay, where am I going to get this information from, and especially what kind of information I'm going to be looking for. And then we come to the second step, which is last week, we talked a lot about the participants in a process, and we mentioned that it's very important to have a relatively large number of participants involved in the whole capitalization process, basically because they are going to be, well, a very important source of information. If they have been involved in the experience, then they know exactly what has happened, what has not happened, why did things take place, etc., etc. So if we're looking for information, they are the first part, the first source where we can go and look for. But of course, they are not the only one. Many people have been involved in the work that we do. If we think of a particular project, just imagine how many people have been involved, not just as beneficiaries, but also as colleagues, as I don't know, partner organizations, etc. And not all of them are going to be in a workshop or in a meeting, or they are not going to be part of the capitalization process directly. But that doesn't mean that we cannot approach them. So they are a fantastic source of information, and we just have to find a way to reach them and find a way to collect the information from them. At the same time, as I said, we have already, most of the time, already a lot of publications which have already been made, and not just, let's say, formal publications, but you can also think of project proposals or project reports or semi-annual reports that you present just to your colleagues, or maybe they are just, yeah, I don't know, simple messages or blog posts or pieces of information which are stored in many different ways within your organization. All of those are sources of information which we can use when trying to describe the work that we are doing. Sorry, before I go to this, when we are going to collect this information, if we think um, secondary information, we can say, okay, we need to go and find these publications, read them, of course, share them, discuss them. If we're going to talk about primary sources of information, we need to organize ourselves so that we go to the field and then we can run different series of interviews. We can organize focus group discussions. We can run surveys, depending, for example, if we are contacting people who are not all of them living on the same place, we can just run a survey online and make it easy for everybody to share information. So an important part here, what I'm trying to say is that we have to discuss how are we going to do it, and then make the best way and the most efficient way for doing it, collecting everything we want to know. But then the next step is that we very soon realize that we have a lot of information and we need to do something with it. It is very important to find a way to organize all this information that we are collecting, because otherwise it becomes very easy to get lost. So we recommend, yeah, doing something with it, putting it in a certain way so that for example, we can very easily make it visible. We can share it in a better way. We can understand what we have. And something which is very important is that by organizing information in a clever way, we can also very clearly see what type of information we still don't have, which means that we still need to go and look for it. And then, of course, share it with others, involve other participants. Um, you are probably familiar with this. There are many different ways of organizing information. Of course, when we think of organizing, we normally think of the archives we keep on our computers and making sure that we know where we put, for example, the results of a survey. We know where to store them. But it is not just the files. It is also the way that we are going to present them or to present it and the way in which we can share it with others. One very simple way, for example, is to organize a checklist in which you identify, okay, this is what I have, or this is what I need to have, and then make sure that you have, for example, answers to specific questions. Another very simple way is what we have here in the photograph, which is a timeline. And this is, perhaps it looks, if you look at it, it does look a bit chaotic. But if you pay attention carefully, you can see that in a very simple way and very schematic, it becomes relatively easy to see what has happened and what have been the results according to time. You draw a line and you make write in this case the years in which you have been working in this particular experience. So you start with 1995 at the left hand for a few years, and then you can identify, okay, activities, results, perhaps specific events that took place, the involvement of a particular person or an organization. This is a very simple way for involving people and getting them to say the things that were important at a particular moment. And at the same time, it is a very simple way for sharing results and letting everybody know what have you got. Now, so far we are trying to describe the experience. If I say we collect all these answers to all these questions, how, what, when, who, with whom, etc. But when we talk about experience capitalization, we need to go a bit further. We are not just describing an experience, but basically we're trying to understand it. We're trying to see what has happened, and most important, we try to see why is it that a particular thing took place, that particular results were found, or why is it that particular results were not found. So as I say, we need to go further than the description. And this is what we mean when we talk about analysis. Here we can have a detailed well, comparison between these different parts. When we're talking about an experience capitalization process, we need to describe in detail this experience. We need to, as I just said, present data and tell where it took place, what activities happened. We need to provide information about it, which in many cases participants already know. Not always, but in many cases they already know all of these activities because they have been actively involved in it. When we talk about the analysis, we try to go further by means that, which means that we try to understand why is it that we had these results? How did we came to these results? why is it that in some cases you have fantastic results and why is it that in other cases you don't, even if you are running the same type of activity? And, and then the most important part of it, what does it mean? What does it mean if we have these results? Does it mean that our project is better? And then what does it mean to be better? So, as it says here, with analysis, we try to understand in detail all the factors that were involved and which contributed to failure or to fantastic results. Here is another simple representation. What we need to understand with this analysis is why is it that something worked? Why is it that something didn't work? So that on the basis of that, we can make a generalization and say that if we continue working in this way or another, it is probably that we are going to have so and so results in the future. And therefore, we recommend or we give advice and we can tell our colleagues or we can tell other organizations to do exactly as we have been doing because we believe that this has been able to show results. This is so much more than a description. And it looks perhaps a little bit complicated, but if you think of it, this is something that we regularly do all the time. All the time we are analyzing our activities. Even if we don't sit and call it analysis, all the time we are thinking, I've been doing this, it worked, therefore I continue doing it. Or I've been doing that and it didn't work so well, therefore I find an alternative or I try to do it in a different way. And when you have found that a particular set of activities do work, then you regularly recommend them. If you're going to your office and you're stuck in traffic, most probably next day you take another route, or you leave a little bit earlier, or you leave a little bit later. The decision of going in another route or going later or earlier is the result of an analysis. We do it unconsciously, but we do it all the time. So sometimes when we talk about analysis, um, yeah, we get a little bit scared because we feel that it requires a lot of yeah, expertise or abilities that we don't normally have. But I think that everybody is analyzing the whole time, and we do it unconsciously, which means that actually we are all very good in doing it. The question is how to go about it. If you go through the literature, if you go on the internet, you will find that there are many different methodologies and tools that help us to try to understand this and to try to come up with these answers that we're looking for. Yeah, you can see some examples here. One of the most common one is the SWOT analysis, by which you look at the strengths and weaknesses of a particular set of activities. And in this way, as I said before, we're just trying to answer why is it that it works, and in terms of what does it work. Many of these methodologies and tools are very well described in the module, so yeah, it is not necessary to go one by one with them. But I try to put here one example, and this is one in which I like because it's one in which, with a very simple set of questions, we try to get information and try to understand exactly what has happened and what have been the factors that contributed to it. If you see this method, it's called 5 whys because, the um, the whole point is in trying to ask why repetitively, but not just to get the same answer, but try to go deeper into the answer. If you follow why is it low, why is goat milk production low? Because there's some factor for it. And the question is, why is it that these things worked or didn't work? And then try to understand again, and why, and why. In this way, what I'm saying is trying specifically to understand the reasons and not just to come up with a description of the results or a description of the outputs which we already knew. Whatever the method that we are using, if we are using these 5 whys, or if we are using well, any of the other ones, I think that something which is very important is to not just say that we are going to be asking why, but also to try to identify um, a few specific ideas that we are interested in. For example, if you look at this example, the participants here are interested in production. So we could say that they are looking in detail at the impact that an experience may have had. But you can look at the same experience and you can look at it, for example, in terms of, let's say, sustainability, or we can look at it in terms of its replicability potential, or we can look at it in terms of, um, I don't know, let's say, social impact. There are many different ways in which we can try to look at the same experience. The important thing here is we have to select what is it that we want to know, and then we come with all these whys and try to understand why is it that something, for example, is sustainable or not? Why is it that something is replicable or not? And then, as I said, select the criteria and then go with this exercise of asking why, but many different times. And then we try to really get as much detail as possible. Once we have been asking ourselves why and we understand what the factors have been, you will very easily see that we know much more of the experience than what we would from a general description. And in this way, it becomes relatively very easy to draw concrete observations and conclusions, and to be able to say with evidence that something is working or that something is not working. Once again, we draw the conclusions on the basis of those points that we are interested in highlighting. Not focusing on the, for example, the participation, focusing on the social impact, focusing on the economic impact. It doesn't matter. The specific orientation that we have chosen for the analysis, it may be the one we want. What I'm saying is that if we go through it and if we regularly ask why and we discuss with all, it becomes relatively easy to come to a conclusion. And on the basis of those conclusions, come with a clear recommendation as to what we should be doing next. And these are the assignments which we are going to recommend. You can see this is another way of organizing information. This is not a timeline, but it is a way which personally I find relatively easy, which by looking at these tables, I am able, or we can be able to um, find out what information we need to know, adding it there, and then saying, this is what I need to know, this is what I know, this is what I need to continue looking for. So yeah, this is, well, a very short presentation of what we mean when we talk about description, and especially what we mean when we talk about analysis. I hope that the difference between the two steps has been clear, but this is something that we can continue discussing still for a few minutes. Thank you, Sophie. Back to you then.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for the presentation. And I've seen that there are already questions. So Dad is asking us, how do you know what info you're missing during the info collection? What parameters should you consider? And whether it's formal or informal, or info across different stakeholders. So I think that Jorge has explained a little bit about the type of information, the primary information to have access to, the secondary type of information that you can access to, and it could be desk work, it can be ever, which is secondary information, or it can be a direct interview with stakeholders. Um, I think there is a good way. It's the question to ask is the why and the how. So I will go back to that slide because this is really something that will help you to identify, do you have the appropriate information? You have to ask yourself, uh, what happened, why it happened that way, how it happened that way, and to have the possibility to analyze it a little bit differently. Um, so the other way to look for, do have I all the information, and am I missing the information? The job aid and that we are providing, and there are more job aids in the module available on the Moodle platform. These are all the tools that will enable you to really identify what you need to collect as information in order to be able later on to document, and before documenting, being able to do the analysis of that information. Maybe Jorge, you would like to also add a few things, so I will mute myself, so I give you the floor.
Thank you, Sophie. I see two questions here. One from Botir also mentioning the importance of selecting a particular experience, which of course comes before describing it and analyzing it in detail. Um, Last week we spoke a little bit about this on mentioning that by experience we refer to actually anything, any type of activity that we are involved in, and which where we are the main actors, the key players in it. But an important thing is it's not just to see it as a project in which we are involved, but perhaps a part of a project, part or a group of activities that the important thing is that we see this as perhaps as part of our work, but of our work, meaning that a group of activities in which we are actively involved, where we are the main participants. And the second part, which I think makes the whole process easier, is that it is not just any type of work that we are involved, a set of activities from which we expect to draw some lessons. So remember that the whole purpose of an experience capitalization process is not just to describe an experience. No, it is to draw lessons from it that we can use to improve our work. So if we're going to select an experience, I would say let us select that experience from which we are going to be able to draw the most important lessons or the most interesting lessons. To me, this is the starting point. We select um, that part of our work which we consider most useful. And of course, that may be something that we are doing quite differently, or something that we are doing which is relatively new, or something which nobody else has tried before. And we want to draw some lessons because nobody has tried it, and therefore we are the ones who are going to show how to do it. To me, that's the starting point. But now, as I said, we start by, if we have selected this, we start by describing it. And describing it means, yeah, where did it happen? What did I do? When did it take place? With whom did it work? So all these key questions that I put at the beginning. Um, I find it useful to have these templates or tables, as I said, because they more or less force us to answer the questions, to fill them up. And then coming to this question, if we see that a particular table or box is empty, then it becomes clear that we have to fill it up, which means that we have to go and look for more information. To me, the most useful The reason why I find these tables useful is because very easily in one very small piece of paper, I can see the information that I have or the information that I need to collect. And then I can go and collect it if I don't have it. Of course, this is only let's say, a way of organizing information, but it is probably not the way in which you're going to share these results with other people. That, of course, comes later, and we will be talking that in the next weeks on how to make sure that information is put in a nice way, documented, and presented in a beautiful way so that everybody understands it. Because if you just share these tables, probably not many people are going to understand what you're saying. Yes?
Yes, it's very good to. This is a working document, these tables. This is why we call this job aids. It's useful documents that enables you to do the job. Vanessa is asking, what happens if you miss some information at the moment of collecting? Do you go back and complete the collection, or do you use another methodology? Um, this is a very good question because actually you remember experience capitalization is a systematic process, but it's you have to reiterate. So of course, you what is nice when you are doing your experience capitalization, you will understand that you're missing some information. So you can go back. And of course, you can also look for the information in different ways. That's why we are proposing several experience capitalization methods and tools that are coming from the facilitation. Uh, you see here in this course, we have put about more than 20 possible methods and tools to be used. But there are also many more. So you can really think about using other things that you know. We have targeted these specifically for the analysis part of the facilitation, the most significant change, the after action review, the appreciative inquiry, the five whys, the example that was given by Jorge, the SWOT, so the strengths, the weakness, the opportunities, and the threats. The fishbone diagram also linked with the five whys to really see the cause and the effects. The six thinking hats to give different perspective from different type of participants. The six questions, which are the one that it's who did what, when, where, how, and the four R's, which is more about the relationship. So uh, we are trying to actually have as much as possible facilitation methodologies so that in small groups you can try to identify the information. And the beauty of having someone being a facilitator, it's that all what is the tacit knowledge or what is what you know, but you are not presenting in an explicit way, the facilitator will help to actually think a little bit further and to remember how did we do this? Why did we do it this way? And again, here is like the midwife, you help the people who are part of the stakeholders to come up with the information and the data. Um, there is another thing that I would like to highlight is when you have all this information and this data, it's important that you have also an agreement on where you're going to put all this information, where it is going to be stored, what are the ways for the different members of the team who are working on this experience capitalization, how you're going to find this information again. If someone is not in the office, would you have a shared drive? How are you? What is the system that you're going to have to name the documents so that you can find them easily, either by dates or by place or by subject? So it's important that you have also an agreement within the team to see how you're going to store your information and how you will be easily be able to have access to it. So this is explained in the whole course, but I thought it was interesting to mention it again. Maybe Botir would like to add something or ask question, or Jorge want to intervene. I'll let you ask answers, and then I would like to do also a little poll about what you're doing with the course. So maybe now I can. Who is raising its hand, Botir or Jorge?
Um, me. I saw a question from Botir and on the role of the manager and what happens if the process itself more or less deviates or goes in another direction. I like this question very much because it shows a bit what you were saying, Sophie, that when we're talking about experience capitalization, most of the times we are not just following step by step and going in a straight line. Most of the times we will find ourselves going up and down and losing direction or going back in another direction because that is the nature of the work that we are doing. Um, yeah, we don't go in straight lines. So this points again to what we were discussing earlier, the important role that the facilitator has, the important role so that he ensures that we are going in the right direction or that if we are going in a different direction, at least it is a direction with which we all agree. I think that it is very easy to get lost. We sometimes collect a lot of information, and the information points in different directions. Some people may be very happy with the experience, and others may not be so satisfied. How do we go about it? How do we select what we want to choose? I think that is one of the reasons why it is so important to make sure what type of information we are collecting, and also so important to show, make it explicit. This is what we have, this is what we don't have, and this is why we need to continue going. And of course, recognizing that this is a participatory process in which many people are involved. So it is not just one who is deciding which way the whole things are going. When running a workshop, is that perhaps we must not think of analysis as important or description as more important. I think we have to see that what we've been discussing today, both parts are very important. It is very important to be able to describe what we're doing in detail, but at the same time, it is very important to analyze it. And perhaps it helps if we see the difference clearly between the two. And what I heard once is that when we're talking about description, we're giving facts. When we're talking about the analysis, basically, what we're doing is giving an opinion. We're saying that with a particular experience is good, is bad, or it's better than another one because, and then we give all these reasons why, which is, as I said, the most important, the interesting part because it is what helps us identify the lessons and the recommendations.